Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That we are.
That we are. I like that. That is a nice twist.
It's a nice a twist?
Yeah.
What a twist.
Yeah. So this is our 26th episode, which is pretty cool.
We can finally rent a car.
We can finally rent a car, and we have some time until we turn 30.
That's right.
Excellent.
Just like you.
Well, getting right into the episode. Seth, what have you been playing?
Recently, I've been playing a game called Brothers, ironically. A Tale of Two Sons, which is a fun game to play after our wonderful episode with interviewing our dad.
Yeah, I think so.
That was a fun episode to produce, and hopefully everybody enjoyed that episode.
I think everyone loved it.
I think so, too. The Brothers game, A Tale of Two Sons, is a game that's developed by a company called Starbreeze Studios, AB.
Okay.
And was made in 2013, or released in 2013. And it is a story of two sons needing to go off into the world to find something to heal their father who is ill. In order to do that, they need to go through a puzzle adventure where they need to overcome difficulties along their journey. And I guess the gimmick of the game is that you control each of the brothers at the same time.
Oh, that's
with
cool.
Individual joysticks. So one brother is on the left joystick and the other brother is on the right joystick. And you have to use them sometimes alone and sometimes together in order to solve a problem. So there may be, an example would be like there's a drawbridge that needs to be dropped down, but you have to have one brother cranking it at all times to keep the drawbridge down. So then one brother will crank it, you can then cross the drawbridge, and then that other brother can use another method to get across the river, as it were.
Okay.
So it's very interesting type of puzzle platformer type of game that it's unique in regards to the play style, as it were. Mm-hmm. It's fun. I enjoy it. It's been a blast kind of going through it. And it's got a very unique art style as well.
Cool. I think I might have a copy of it from a Humble Bundle.
I think that's where I got my copy of it.
Oh, nice. So that might check out.
Yeah, I recommend playing it. I would also recommend playing it on your couch. I had a lot of fun playing it sitting on my couch with my Xbox controller and just so I just stream it using my Steam Link.
Yeah.
One of the few that are actually out in the wild, because I know it's not a very popular thing, but I like it a lot. And I stream my games onto my TV, but very specific games. And this is one of those games that's very specific in regards to being able to stream it.
Cool.
What about you? What have you most recently been playing?
Well, I have recently been playing an older title, Zork, the Great Underground Empire, Part 1. Which
it's exciting.
Yes, which is a text-based adventure game that was originally released in 1980, and I was actually playing it on my newly functional Apple II computer, which I posted a bit about on our Instagram and our Twitter. So I own an Apple II computer from specifically the Apple IIe model, and I was having trouble getting it to run, and I finally got it to run after some troubleshooting. And after I got it to run, I created some discs using a modern program, and one of those discs being Zork, which is a fun adventure game. I could have easily just played it on my GOG copy.
Windows or probably online somewhere.
Or yeah, I mean, it is one of the. I mean, I probably say this with a ton of games like Doom and some other games, but it is one of the most widely available games in the history of video games. I'm pretty sure. It is mostly due to the fact that it is all text-based. And by text-based, I mean there are zero graphics for Zork. There are some enhanced versions of Zork that do have some graphical elements, but that is not how Zork was originally played. Zork was originally played with a black screen and white text, or a black screen and green text if you had a monochrome monitor back in the early 80s. I thought it'd be fun to try out on the Apple as just a way to get it to test out. It's a little slower to run on the Apple because it has to pull each line of text from the disk, so the disk has to load every paragraph, which takes like a couple seconds, so it's not as instant as it is if I was playing it on a modern computer.
And that's a 5 1/4 disc.
That is
not
a
CD-ROM.
Right, that is a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk, which is a proper floppy disk, not an 8-inch floppy, which were the floppiest of floppies. But this is a fairly floppy disk.
Yeah, but the 3.5 doesn't flop.
3.5 does not flop unless you throw it in the air, and then it might flop around and then flop. But the 5 1/4 is floppy.
Definitely flop.
For those who haven't played Zork, again, it is text-based, but it's a fantasy adventure where you were solving puzzles and traversing a magical land and fighting off creatures and stuff like that. It's a fairly comprehensive adventure game. I definitely recommend, if you like adventure games, giving it a try. It is fairly dated. It's a lot of reading, but it is, I think, a fun little experience into that kind of time period, early adventure games. It also it's very tongue-in-cheek. It has a lot of humor in the game. Like, you don't even get the title of the game until you actually do stuff in it. You have to open a mailbox and read a envelope, and when you open the envelope, it says like, "Welcome to Zork." You know,
and in the cabin, right?
Yeah. By the cabin. It's a cool game. It's part of a vast series of Zork games that came out throughout the 80s and into the 90s by Infocom, which was actually based here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is pretty cool. One of the coolest things about Zork, though, when I was reading about it just before this podcast, was that it was ported over in Japan to the NEC PC 9801, which is a PC over in Japan. And they actually ported that version of Zork to the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation, which I think is the best segue into our episode today, which is on the Sony PlayStation. Look at that, Seth.
Look at that.
I could do segues too.
Yeah, that was a smooth segue.
Very smooth segue. Very smooth. The creator of the segue, Dean Kamen, would be very, very proud of me for how smooth that segue was. In any case, yes, today we are talking about the Sony PlayStation. It is the first console by Sony. It is a disc-based system. It's very cool. And Seth, what are your memories of the Sony PlayStation?
I think most of my memories regarding the original Sony PlayStation are a lot of tactile memories in regards to like how it felt, putting the disc in, the clicking of the CD, the CD disc drive clicking in, the CD spinning up and having to play, and it made like a weird crunching noise when it loaded.
Yeah,
like the CD like thinking crunching kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it was the header going back and forth trying to read the disc, and it'd be like,
yeah, the header noise, like all that was really like my main memory of the PlayStation, is a lot of those tactile senses. The PlayStation was really the first true game system that was a CD-ROM that I played regularly. I had a friend who had a Sega Saturn, and I had a friend who had a Dreamcast, but both of those I did not play regularly. The PlayStation I did play regularly. I think eventually we got our own PlayStation, but I was able to go over friends' houses who had PlayStations to play them as well. Though I feel like whenever it came down to like the N64 versus the Sony PlayStation, I feel like the N64 was always superior in regards that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Sony PlayStation only had 2-player capability without any sort of modding.
Yeah, so there was not really modding, but you had to buy what was called a multi-tap.
Like accessories.
Yeah, which offered for multiple ports. But yeah, the PlayStation definitely had some drawbacks to it that the N64,
the N64 had 4 plugs.
The N64 had 4 plugs, and while it didn't have CD quality audio, didn't have to wait very long for those cartridges to load.
That's right.
Because they were instant.
You could get right into the Super Smash, which was kind of the important part.
Absolutely.
Though the PlayStation, I always kind of considered it to be kind of I don't know. It was just I remember the polygonal graphics. There was a particular fighting game that I will talk about when we get to our games section that I remember because I believe our cousins had PlayStation, and they had this particular fighting game that I remember, and that was interesting. Yeah. And also, of course, the Tony Hawk series and the Twisted Metal series were all on the PlayStation.
Oh yeah. And those
I remember, games. Yeah, and I remember playing them and watching people play them. They were, and of course, games that we've mentioned previously, like Spyro and Crash, and these Final Fantasy VII. I also feel like PlayStation did horror games better than the N64.
Yeah.
So like Resident Evil and Silent Hill were on the PlayStation, and I feel like I remember them being there and watching people play the games and being creeped out, but they didn't really have kind of an equivalency on the N64.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk a bit about one of the reasons why I think the PlayStation was successful, and I think I think that is one of the reasons why there are more horror games on the PlayStation, is this particular reason, but we'll go into that bit when we talk more about the history of the console. But yeah, I agree. I think my memories of the PlayStation, I always felt for some reason it felt more adult to me when I was using it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think the idea of using CDs over cartridges just felt a little more adult to me. I think because I always associated CDs with like music and DVDs and, well, we didn't really have DVDs, but with music and stuff like that, they always came with those really nice jewel cases. It was always something that you had to protect because you didn't want to get them scratched. Whereas cartridges were kind of like, you can like throw it at a wall and the cartridge probably would still work. I mean, there's stories of people who like leave the cartridges out for days in the sun and then they plug them in and they're fine, but with CDs, you had to be more careful. You had to be more gentle with them. So that was a bit more of like an adult thing to have to utilize it. And also the games just felt more adult to me. They like a lot of the games I played, some of the games I played were definitely more child friendly, like Spyro and Crash Bandicoot and the Harry Potter games. But some of the games, like there was a James Bond game I remember playing, which it felt very adult. It felt different than like GoldenEye, which was, a T-rated game, but it was still a Nintendo game. It still had kind of a Nintendo flair to it. You could do big head mode in the game, but in Tomorrow Never Dies, which was the James Bond game, I remember like dark levels. There was like a car racing segment. It just felt very serious. And thinking about some other games that came out for the system that I didn't play, but I probably had some knowledge of them as I grew older, like the Final Fantasy games or Metal Gear Solid. Those are very serious games. Final Fantasy is a very, very serious RPG. Metal Gear Solid is a very serious, tactical espionage game, as it calls itself. So it always just felt more adult to me. You didn't see those type of games on an N64, on the Nintendo systems.
I also remember a lot of fighting games on the PlayStation.
Yeah, a lot of, yeah.
There was definitely like Mortal Kombat was on it, Street Fighter was on it, they had Marvel vs. Capcom was on it, and then there was all these like miscellaneous fighting games. There's also like Tekken. Yeah. And they had some Dead or Alive was on it as well. So we could just go on about fighting games, and I think eventually we'll get into an episode where we just talk about fighting games. But I remember the PlayStation having boatload of fighting games. Like if you owned a PlayStation, you had a fighting game.
Oh yeah, definitely. And a ton of RPG games. I mean, a lot of PlayStation, like anime themed RPG games, Japanese RPG games. So not just Final Fantasy, but also Xenogears was another game, Legend of Dragoon, Suikoden was another one for the PlayStation. And these were all games that used like anime art style. I think that was another thing I remember was I kind of associated the PlayStation with almost like anime. Like it felt like a very anime console.
Yes, I would agree with that, to the point where one of the main, like when I think PlayStation and I think PlayStation fighting game, the game that I think of is a game called Evil Zone.
Oh yeah.
Which came out in 99 and was pretty much an anime fighting game.
Yes, yeah. Oh yeah. I just pulled up some images of it, and it looks very anime. I mean, the cover is like long white-haired woman holding a staff, with some like a face marking or something like that. Yeah, very, very, very anime.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Evil Zone again in the back half as well.
Yeah. So for a little history of the PlayStation 1, it was originally conceived as actually a CD-based add-on for the Super Nintendo. But what happened was Nintendo came to Philips and said, hey, we want you to make a CD-based add-on. And then they also, at the same time, went to Sony and said, hey, we want you to make a CD-based add-on. And what they were doing was they were seeing who could make the better CD-based add-on. And Sony and Philips did not know that they were competing for this. Nintendo saw what Sony was working on and approved of it, and they actually dropped Philips almost immediately from the license, but they allowed Philips to use some Nintendo IPs for a project that they were working on, which became the infamous Philips CDI, which had some very, very bad Legend of Zelda games on it. Sony, meanwhile, continued to work on what was known at the time as the Nintendo PlayStation, which is very weird coming out of my mouth, and I feel like I'm an adult who does not know what video games are saying that.
One just sold.
Yeah, so there was only one known prototype developed for it, and it was actually part of an auction where a former Sony CEO went on to work for a company called Avanta, I think it was, and then Avanta filed for bankruptcy, and a guy bought a lot from the bankruptcy auction, and it was in the lot, which is really cool. And this dude on YouTube, who I recommend if you're into retro computing or electronics, named Ben Heck, did a teardown of the PlayStation prototype and actually got it to work. It was not functioning at the time of him having it in his hands. So he took it apart, and he actually found some replacement parts for burnt out chips and such, and got it to operate the way it was supposed to, which is really cool. Seeing it actually boot up and say like Nintendo PlayStation and stuff. So Nintendo apparently decided they wanted to go a different direction. They actually cut Sony from the deal. Sony decided they were going to step away and make their own system, which they kept the PlayStation moniker. And then it came out in 1995 in the United States, 94 in Japan. It was incredibly successful, and I made a note here. I think one of the things that made it so successful, and one of the reasons that you had some of these very adult games on it at times, very, very like horror games and serious games and anime fighting games and such, was because Sony was very open to third-party developers, which was something that Nintendo and Sega were not open to.
No.
So if you bought a Nintendo system, you bought Nintendo games. They were games that some of them were third-party developed, but they had to go through an approval process through Nintendo, which was very rigorous. And Nintendo had certain things that they would not want you to include in the game, barring some exceptions. They allowed certain games to appear on their console due to games being popular, like Doom or something like that. But there were certain things that they wouldn't allow on their console. For example, in Mortal Kombat, the blood was taken out of the Super Nintendo port.
Yeah, but it was in PlayStation.
And Sony was A-okay with third-party developers. They liked them, and they would give out their dev kits to third-party developers to develop for them. And that's where you had some of these horror games and fantasy and RPG games and other games coming out for the system because of the third-party developers being so closely involved with the process of making games with Sony.
I think to the point where some people may be confused where Sony ends and where the third-party developer even begins.
Yeah.
With some of these games where they were developed and published by take Final Fantasy for example. You know, it's Squaresoft. They were third party.
Yeah.
But you know, you might almost think them synonymous with Sony.
Absolutely. Or for example, you know, Spyro or Crash Bandicoot, these were third party. In many ways, people almost associate Spyro and Crash Bandicoot being the mascots of Sony, but they weren't. They were the mascots of Insomniac and Naughty Dog, who were the third party developers.
Naughty Dog went on to do Uncharted and also the other game that we were talking about.
Last of Us.
Oh, Last of Us, yes.
Yeah.
Last of Us and Last of Us 2.
Yeah.
So Naughty Dog had started with Crash Bandicoot and is now doing still games for the PlayStation.
Yeah, and they obviously have had a good relationship with Sony to be able to still work with them in
5 iterations of the system.
And with exclusivity. You know, and that's not, I don't think, on contract or something between them. I think that's just because Naughty Dog trusts Sony to the point of knowing that their game will sell on a Sony console. And most Naughty Dog games, from my understanding, are exclusive to the Sony. The one caveat that I am well aware of, though, is the recent remaster of Crash Bandicoot, which is on everything. But that doesn't really count as like a Naughty Dog game, because I don't think they're closely involved with that.
I feel like Crash Bandicoot's like public domain now.
Yeah, at this point, yeah. But that is on everything, including the Switch.
The Uncharted and The Last of Us are exclusive. I actually purchased a PlayStation 3, not necessarily for The Last of Us, but it did help make the decision.
Yeah.
And I have very few. So I own a PlayStation 3, and I have very few games for the PlayStation 3. In those few games that I own, 2 of them are by Naughty Dog, and they are Uncharted and The Last of Us. So that goes to show how good they are, right? Like, I have 5 PlayStation 3 games, and 2 of the 5 are Naughty Dog produced games.
And if you want to know just how much Sony loved the PlayStation, know that until the PlayStation 4, the Sony consoles were backwards compatible with the PlayStation 1. So PlayStation 2 is backwards compatible with PlayStation 1, and PlayStation 3 is backwards compatible with PlayStation 1, which is great. You know, if you have a PlayStation 3, grab some PS1 games, because they function normally and they're in HD and it's beautiful. There are a couple of PlayStation 1 games that really stand out, I think, as some solid games. Seth, do you want to talk about some of the games that we have?
So I don't think we can go and talk about PlayStation 1 without talking about Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 7 came out in 1997, was made up by Squaresoft, which eventually becomes Square Enix. It is probably one of the more well-known Final Fantasy games. It is very much a staple in the Final Fantasy mythos, as it were. It recently was remastered, so that they now have a new Final Fantasy VII redone. Though the original was very polygonal.
It almost humorously polygonal, yeah.
Yes. Very polygonal. It played like a Final Fantasy. Unlike the remaster, you would go into traditional JRPG type of battle menus where you would go in and you'd select what you would do, tab through each person, and they would take their action, and you'd wander the map and get attacked by random monsters, versus how I believe the remaster plays. I have actually not played the remaster, or the remake, so I don't have any familiarity with that. I still have only a PlayStation 3. Zach's the one with the PlayStation 4. Though it's a great franchise. It's very much a cash cow for Sony.
Oh yeah,
as Final Fantasy games are exclusive to the PlayStation, beyond earlier ones, which were on like the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
But like once Final Fantasy, or are the Final Fantasies on the Switch? Yes, some of them are.
Yes,
yeah.
I think.
So they're not exclusive to Sony. They're just exclusive to consoles and not on Xbox.
Right, yeah.
They're selective on games, because I don't believe you can get them on the Xbox.
Yeah, I don't.
Somebody might correct me.
I don't even know if you can get I know 7 was ported, the like original 7 was ported to a bunch of stuff, but I'm pretty sure it's like it's just not on Xbox. Like it's on the computer. But you know.
Yes. I actually looked for 3.6 on the Switch, and I don't think the earlier Final Fantasies are on it, or they were, and I didn't want to buy them. So that was valuable information I know right there.
Right, yeah.
Though you play as a Cloud and you go through the world, and that's where Cloud and Sephiroth come from. It's a traditional Final Fantasy.
It is
epic.
Yeah.
Arc.
And as Seth was saying, you know, even it does use polygonal graphics, but it was also the first of the Final Fantasy games to be fully 3D and also
Correct.
to have full motion rendered cutscenes, which was big, and it was why Square made the jump from Nintendo to PlayStation. Originally, Final Fantasy VII was actually conceived for the Super Nintendo, but when Square saw what Sony was able to do, they said, "Hey, you know what? Sony's doing what Nintendo isn't, so let's jump over there and experiment with it," which they did, and I think they did to some great success.
And with the CD aspect, they were able to get a much longer form game in there, and the game could be a lot more detailed and in depth because the CD had the capacity. I think they even play some PlayStation games. They have had multi-disc sets.
Yeah, actually, Final Fantasy VII is a 3-disc set.
So they weren't contained, so which would be next to impossible to do in a cartridge.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Which would be what the N64 was. So if based on what Square Enix wanted to make, the Sony PlayStation was the only location that they could go to.
I will say next to near impossible, because Resident Evil, which came out for the PlayStation 1, also had a sequel in the PlayStation 1, which was Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 was also multi-disc game and was ported to the Nintendo 64 in its entirety in one cartridge. It was a very ambitious port. It's not great. It's okay. It's not, I don't want to criticize it too much because it actually is a fairly decent port. But it is very ambitious if you think about them porting a 2-disc like massive game like Resident Evil 2 over to a small cartridge. That, you know, it was a very interesting attempt on Capcom to broaden their market there. But that being said, that wasn't the case with most Sony games. Most Sony games remained on Sony system. On the PlayStation. So, for example, Spyro the Dragon and Crash Bandicoot both benefited from the PlayStation's disc-based medium in terms of the music and the world that they were creating. Spyro in particular uses some render distance drawing techniques that the N64 isn't capable of doing, which allowed for the world to appear bigger. Both games are considered classics. Spyro was made by Insomniac Games, and as Seth mentioned, Crash Bandicoot was Naughty Dog. Two games that I always have to talk about with PlayStation are two of my favorite games because of just how weird they are, and that is the Harry Potter games on the PlayStation. So,
oh god,
yeah, not all PlayStation games were great, but some of them were very memorable, and these two I had some good memories with these. I had a copy of the second Harry Potter game for the PlayStation, The Chamber of Secrets, and these were kind of cool, I don't want to say open world, semi-open roaming adventure platforming games where you could explore Hogwarts, learn spells, find secrets, and while the PC versions of the games were far better, quote unquote, the PlayStation versions were still very cool to play. And I remember just going through Hogwarts on the PlayStation version and seeing Hogwarts really for the first time, because this was right around the time the movie came out. And it was a really interesting experience to kind of, you kind of felt like you were actually going to the school, you know, which is ridiculous to say, looking at the graphics as they are. I think I showed Seth a couple of the graphics from that game, and he got a kick out of those.
So we were talking about multi-disc sets, and if you played games back in the early 2000s, you ran into that a lot. So you ran into games that had 3, 4, 5 discs. Changing discs was kind of a thing, which kind of why games have gone to a digital medium. So to kind of bring into a point of why Sony was leading the way, why having a CD-ROM was a CD-ROM, a standard 120 millimeter CD-ROM could hold about 737 megabytes.
Right.
So if you had a game that was going to be a gig or two, you needed 3 or 4 CD-ROMs.
Yeah.
Once they moved into DVD capabilities, which I believe the PlayStation 2
yeah.
could do. Yeah, two forward could do DVDs. That moved it up to being 4.7 gigs on a single layer DVD-ROM. So you could save down to 6 CD-ROMs. So if you then go to Blu-ray, you can get up towards of 25, depending on the layers. There's like dual layers, triple layer. So dual layer can do 50 gigs, and a single layer Blu-ray is a 25 gig item. So 25 gigabytes. So obviously newer consoles have to be able to read Blu-ray. Because to kind of get into scale, if you look at a game like, let's say you want to play Red Dead Redemption 2, that game takes up 140 gigs.
Right, yeah, it's huge.
It's something like games like that, where if you want a game of that scale, I know Grand Theft Auto 5 takes up like 60 to 70 gigs. Can't get a game of that scale onto a CD-ROM.
Right.
Right? So they were limited by the size of the storage medium, and the cartridge that the N64 you could probably get maybe 500 megs on it. And that's really capping it at the end right there.
Right.
So doing the Resident Evil port over was risky, and why probably lost performance, because they shoved it all into a cartridge. So that medium for Sony really allowed developers to kind of go crazy with their worlds at that time.
Definitely. They were allowed to really build on these worlds and create, vast worlds that we never saw before. Besides maybe on a computer, and that was I think when it comes to console gaming versus PC gaming, while PC games were, vast at the time and could do some of the things that the PlayStation was tackling a market that PC games couldn't always tackle. If you wanted the top of the line PC game at that time, you had to make sure you had the right graphics card, make sure you had the right sound card, make sure you had a proper connection. If it was multiplayer, you had to make sure you had this and this and this, and it would add up. Meanwhile, you grab a PlayStation for a couple $100, grab a game for $40, $50, and there you go. That's it. And if you want to play multiplayer, get a second controller. It's like
right.
The cost. It was far more cost effective for the consumer, and still is for the consumer. I think that really shined because you could get fairly PC quality games on a consumer available hardware. And they actually ported some PC games over to the PlayStation. There was a version of Myst, Riven, Zork was available over in Japan, Warcraft was on it, and all the first person shooters, Doom, Duke Nukem. And while some of them have some stunted performance, I believe the Duke Nukem port and such, for the most part they run equivalent, and it was good to have that for the consumer, which I'm sure Seth would agree with.
Right. So I did mention in the front of the episode that we were going to talk a little bit about Evil Zone.
Yes, yeah. I don't want to forget about Evil Zone.
We can't forget about Evil Zone, though we may talk more about Evil Zone when we do a fighting game. So Evil Zone is actually almost a fever dream game for me. I remember playing it a lot at my cousin's house, and it being very much an anime but a fighting game. And every character in the game has a unique story, which progresses through like it's a television series. And with episode names.
Yeah.
And there's voice acting and previews to it for each episode and stuff. And you learn more about the backstory and why they're fighting. as you play every single character. There is 10 characters to choose from. So you have 10 different story modes where you can go through these like almost like 10 little mini animes where you learn about every single character, including a fully fleshed out story mode for the boss. So which was one of the few games that did that. It was released in 1999 and had single player and multiplayer because it was a fighting game. They had like completely like its own little, it was like done up like anime too. So like it was stylized very much to anime. Really cool game. I think it inspired me to kind of, so I'm not a huge anime fan, but it did inspire me to like appreciate more the genre and the whole thing. Kind of like got me to kind of be like, oh, this is why people like this type of art style and stuff. It did get a average game ranking of 62.23%. So it's an okay game.
An okay game.
So with that, I think we are done with PlayStation.
Yeah, I think so too.
We'll talk about some of these games again, I'm sure.
Yeah, and there's
their own rights.
There's a ton of games that were available for the PlayStation that I think Seth and myself may have experienced in one place or another. So we'll definitely revisit the console in future episodes.
So with that, we're going to move into our buy, wait, pass. So Zach, what are you exciting about buying, waiting, or passing on?
So the game for my buy, wait, pass is the up and coming SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, which is scheduled for release on June 23rd, 2020. This is actually a game we saw at PAX. I didn't get a chance to play it because it was a very long line to play it, if you could imagine. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom was originally released on the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the Xbox, the original Xbox, back in the early 2000s. In 2003, it is a 3D collectathon game, and by collectathon, that's kind of like a game like Banjo-Kazooie or Conker's Bad Fur Day. A lot of like the rare games for the N64 were collectathons. You know, you go around collecting items, and those help you get to other parts of the game, and through a 3D kind of open world environment. So this game is a full remaster of it, being powered by the Unreal Engine, and supporting in 4K resolution. They're going all out for it. It's
just like the new movie.
It's being developed by Purple Lamp Studios, published by THQ Nordic. I've seen some gameplay of it. I got to see some actual gameplay of it at PAX from people playing. Again, I didn't get my hands on it. It looks very, very cool. I'm a big fan of the collectathon style of game. You know, I like those styles of 3D platformers. I grew up with SpongeBob, so I have some fond memories of watching the television show, and this is from that early period of SpongeBob. 2003 was the original game, so it's a lot of the earlier jokes and stuff are going to be referenced in it. I think I'm currently on a wait just because I actually never played the original Battle for Bikini Bottom when I was growing up. It just wasn't a game I had. So part of me kind of wants to see if I can find a copy of that. I'm pretty sure it's available at my local game store. I kind of want to give the original game a try before I jump into the remaster, just so I can appreciate it a little more. I feel like jumping into a remaster of a game that I don't have a lot of memories of isn't going to be as great of an experience as playing the game with fresh eyes. So I think I'm going to hold off on it a bit. I want to see if I can get myself a copy of the original game, preferably for the GameCube or PlayStation 2, and then once I have time to play through that a little bit, I'll look into buying the remake and talking about it then. Seth,
nice.
What about you?
Well, what I'm excited about buying, waiting, or passing on is a game called Enemy on Board, Trust No One is the tagline. Enemy on Board is a multiplayer 4v2.
Oh.
Which is an interesting, it's a atypical type of style, or asymmetrical. So asymmetrical games are kind of like Dead by Daylight, which is a 1v4. There's also Evolve, which is another 1v4.
Not to be confused with Evolvo, that game.
Evolva, which is that game in Fever Dreams.
Yes.
Enemy on board is 4v2, which is interesting. It's a social deception game where 6 crew members try and figure out who among them are actually murderous shapeshifting aliens. And so it's like a 3D environment where you're running around, you're detecting, deceiving, destroying your way to victory. I think it would be a great game to play with 6 people that I am familiar with, or 5 people that I'm familiar with. I don't know if I don't particularly like doing social deception games with strangers beyond so I don't mind Town of Salem or games that are text driven, but when it's voice driven, I don't particularly like. I was going to say talking to strangers, but that would be sounding weird because we do a podcast.
Yeah,
so I obviously don't have problems with that.
The whole point of a podcast is talking to strangers.
Right.
I guess we're not hearing them talk back.
Right. So I don't know. I just sometimes get a little. I'm getting better about it, but I've always just been very. I don't know, playing with people I don't know and talking to them. I have no patience for it, but it is free to play, though you can get a Founders Edition because it's in early access. It came out into early access on the 8th of May of this year, so it's currently free to play. They also have a Founders Edition, which may give you more stuff, and that's $20 or $19.99 MSRP.
Yeah.
It is being developed by 5 people, and being published by those 5 people.
Nice.
A company called Windwalk Games, and so I'm pretty excited to see how it plays. Though I'm going to put it down as a wait, even though I'm excited, because I would like to play this for free with 5 people that I know, and I don't know if that ever gets around to being a fact that can happen. But if it is, and this would probably be a game that I would want to check out. So at least I know we always have 2, me and Zach, but to extend it past that is hard.
We could try to get all the Ryans together.
We could try and get every Ryan together. That could be it. We can call out to all Ryans. So then that's going to be it for I'm putting it down as a wait.
Awesome.
There we go.
Sounds good. Well, hey.
Should you tell people about how they could contact us, listen to us, or support us?
That's funny, Seth. I was just about to do that. So there are many ways that you can contact us, listen to us, support us, etc., etc. To contact us, you can visit our website, www.classicgamingbrothers.com, and go to the contact form that we have on our website. Fill that out, type in the question, comment, concern that you have, press send. It'll go straight to our inbox of our email, which you can also contact us by, which is classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. If you want to get onto social media, if you're not onto social media, you can visit us on our Facebook, Classic Gaming Brothers. You can visit us on our Instagram, Classic Gaming Brothers. You can visit us on our Twitter, CG Brothers Pod. All of those are other ways that you can get in contact with us. You can message us, you can comment on our wall, our picture, etc., etc. And we will be in touch with you.
Oh, we forgot something. We were going to do a drawing.
Well, let me finish doing this and then we'll do the drawing.
Yes, okay.
If you want to support us, whoa, that's awesome. You can visit our website and you can subscribe to us there. There's a Podbean little widget there that should take you to the Podbean, so you can subscribe there. You can also visit us at any of the other podcasting applications that are out. Acast, Castbox, Spotify, Apple, Google, etc., etc., etc. Those are all great ways that you can listen to us. As a heads up, if you are listening to this is during the COVID-19 pandemic, and you want to order something off of our website, we greatly appreciate it, but we are currently experiencing some long wait times due to our distributor for the for the products that we sell on our website having some delays due to the pandemic. So just as a heads up, it could be a couple months before anything gets sent out to you. You're free to order it anyway. We'll appreciate it, but it's not going to get sent real quick. What am I missing? Oh, Twitch. You can visit us on Twitch, Classic Gaming Brothers, or you can go to VS Classic Gaming Brothers for my view. You can subscribe to us there. We very much appreciate it. You can visit our YouTube where we have some of our Twitch highlights posted. We also have some of these episodes posted as well. Well, Seth, we have a giveaway. That's pretty exciting.
We do have a giveaway. I got the tickets here and all of the entries. I'm going to go through them now. Does that sound like me going through them?
No, it sounded like
Should I get something else?
Yeah, it sounded like you ripping one.
Hold on. Maybe this will make it sound going through all of our entries.
Oh yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's much better.
All right, and the winner is Dylan.
Whoa!
Congratulations,
Dylan.
Woo! Our second giveaway winner ever.
Who knows? We may have more.
26 episodes. We've done 2. We're pretty timely with those. We'll do more if you send us feedback. You can also send us additional feedback and to our email, and then you can be entered into our giveaway where we'll eventually draw you. If you want us to draw it sooner because you think that you have a good chance of winning, send us a message and tell us that you want us to do a sooner drawing.
Yeah. Reminders are very helpful.
They are very helpful. We always forget about things that we do. Well, with that said, don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.